The thing that made Wren Calloway finally quit was not what she saw on the morning of October 14th, 2019, along the eastern perimeter of Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, near the trailhead marker for the Langeal Ridge Connector Path. It was not the shape, not the silence, not even the smell of something sweet and ferrous that had no business being that far from the nearest road. What made her quit was the moment she realized, standing there with her radio crackling static against her hip, that whatever she was looking at already knew her name, and had known it, she would later calculate, for at least 3 weeks before she did. Wren had been with the USDA Forest Service for 11 years when it happened. She had started at 24, fresh out of the Natural Resources Management program at Oregon State, and had worked through 2 districts and 1 reassignment before landing a permanent post at the Cowlitz Valley Ranger District in the summer of 2009. She was not a superstitious woman. She had a rack of Tilly hats arranged by season, a Dutch oven she carried on every overnight, and a preference for laminated topographical maps over GPS units because, as she told every seasonal employee, batteries die and paper does not. She had a category system for unusual encounters: bear, cougar, feral livestock, disoriented hiker, illegal camp. And in 11 years, she had never needed a 7th category. Her first morning in the sector that fall had been unremarkable. The Langeal Ridge connector sees moderate foot traffic through September and almost none after the first consistent rain, which in 2019 had come on October 2nd, dropping 3.5 inches in 36 hours and turning the lower trail to a channel of gray runoff. Wren walked the eastern perimeter on October 3rd, noting a downed hemlock across the connector at the 2.4-mile marker, and a section of washout near the culvert below the Goat Rocks wilderness boundary. She logged both in her field journal, a narrow, write-in-the-rain notebook she replaced every 6 months, and flagged the washout with reflective orange tape. She noticed that first morning that the birds were quiet at the trailhead. Not the gradual quiet of a hawk overhead or the spreading silence after a loud noise. A different kind of quiet. A quiet that had texture, like a room where someone has just stopped speaking. She noted it and moved on. The hemlock was more pressing. The second anomaly came 9 days later. On October 12th, Wren found a section of orange flagging tape removed from the washout stake and laid flat on the trail, lengthwise, in a neat line approximately 4 feet long. The tape was not tangled, not torn, not shredded by weather. It had been unwound from the stake with care. The stake was still in the ground, clean, and placed as if to mark something, as if to show something to whoever came next. She photographed it. She noted in her field journal, flagging disturbed, possible, curious hiker, although trail shows no recent foot traffic post-rain. She replaced the tape and continued her patrol. That evening, she mentioned it to Pel Okafor, a wildlife biologist who used the district office twice a week to file his survey forms. He had worked Gifford-Pinchot for 6 years. He was methodical and dryly humorous and not easily rattled, and he listened to Wren's account with the focused stillness of a man processing information he is not sure how to categorize. "Hiker," he said finally. "No prints. No prints anywhere in that section." He was quiet. "Wind?" It was laid out flat, lengthwise, like an arrow. He had no answer for that, and neither did she. On October 14th, Wren reached the 2.4-mile marker at approximately 8:40 in the morning. The downed hemlock had been partially cleared, not with a chainsaw, which would have left resinous sawdust and bark scatter, but broken in segments, the segments stacked against the slope bank with a tidiness that stopped her cold. The breaks were not clean cuts. They were fractures, pale at the center, with the fibrous compression pattern of wood that has been bent slowly past its yield point. Bending a hemlock trunk 3 inches in diameter to fracture requires a sustained force of roughly 800 pounds. She did not know the exact figure at the time. She looked it up later, in the months after she resigned. She stood at the marker and became aware, slowly, of the silence. Not the gradual quiet of October 3rd. The same silence, but denser now, closer. She could hear her own heartbeat in the passage of her inner ear as a low rhythmic pressure, and she became aware of it because something else was synchronizing with it. A sound from the tree line. Low, barely above the threshold of perception, a soft percussion, something solid meeting something fibrous at long intervals. She stood still and listened. After 30 or 40 seconds, she understood what was unsettling about it. The intervals were not irregular. They were mimicking her heartbeat. Slightly off, just enough off that her body registered the wrongness before her mind named it, but the pattern was a response. As her breathing quickened and her pulse accelerated, the sound accelerated with it. When she forced herself to breathe slowly, counting 4 counts in and 6 counts out, the sound slowed to match. She did not run. 11 years of training told her not to run. She turned around, walked back down the connector toward the trailhead, and kept her breathing controlled. The sound followed her for approximately half a mile, always at the same distance, always at the same rhythm as her pulse. Then it stopped. She sat in her pickup for 22 minutes before she trusted herself to drive. She called in a standard patrol completion. She did not mention the sound. Over the following 3 days, she told herself a series of things. She told herself the sound had been a woodpecker. She told herself the synchronization had been a trick of stress-heightened attention. She told herself the hemlock had been cleared by a trail crew she hadn't been notified about. She made phone calls. There had been no trail crew in that sector in October. Nobody had touched the Langeal Ridge connector since a volunteer group in July. She went back on October 17th. She needed to find something ordinary to write in her field journal, something that would close the category she had involuntarily opened. At the 2.4-mile marker, the wood stack was gone. Not scattered, gone. The soil under where it had rested was bare and slightly compressed. She spent 40 minutes walking the perimeter. The forest floor was undisturbed on both sides. Near the slope bank, she found one partial impression in a patch of silt. Something had pressed down here, with weight, a single time. Roughly oval, 11 inches long, no toe or heel definition. Not a boot, not a hoof, not a paw print in any configuration she recognized. An indentation with clean edges and a flat base, as if something had rested its weight on a surface area not shaped like any foot she had a name for. She photographed the impression from every angle. That evening, she sent the photographs to a colleague in the wildlife division. He wrote back 2 days later, "Probably press from a branch or log. Don't overthink it." She did not respond. On October 22nd, Pell came into the district office for his Wednesday survey submission. He looked at her for a moment without speaking. "You doing the eastern perimeter still?" he asked. "Langeal Ridge, yeah." He showed her a photograph on his phone. A thermal image from his automated Bayer survey camera. Amber gradients on black, the silhouette of tree trunks in false color. In the background, approximately 40 meters from the camera position, something radiated heat. He had measured it against a known fir in the frame, 14 feet at its crown, and the shape was roughly equivalent in height, though narrower. The heat signature was even, uniform, with none of the gradient variation produced by a body that metabolizes internally. It looked less like a warm animal and more like a warm outline, like a border between temperatures, like the edge of something rather than the thing itself. "When was this?" Wren asked. "October 3rd, about 8:20 in the morning." She looked at him. He looked at her. She had been at the trailhead marker at 8:10 on October 3rd, less than a mile from Pell's camera position. She had noticed the birds were quiet. She had moved on because the hemlock was more pressing. "Probably a bear with mange," Pell said. Thermal signature gets weird when they lose coat coverage. He said this in the tone of a man who does not believe what he is saying. She went home and looked at her field journal. She flipped to a blank page and sat for a long time with the pen in her hand. She was calculating. October 3rd had been her first patrol in the sector. The thing in Pell's thermal image had been there at almost exactly the time she arrived. It had been there for the flagging tape on October 12th. It had been there on October 14th, synchronizing to her heartbeat in the tree line. It had moved the wood stack in the 48 hours after she walked away. It had known she was assigned to that sector before she had logged a single patrol. She went back one more time. She went back on October 28th to confirm one thing, knowing she would not find a good answer, but needing the data anyway. She walked to the 3.1-mile marker and stood in the gray morning light and waited. For 19 minutes, nothing happened. On the 19th minute, at a distance she estimated at 60 meters, something moved between two Douglas firs. Not through the gap, between them, through a space too narrow for anything with volume. She tracked it in peripheral vision and did not turn her head because something older than her training told her that turning her head would be the wrong kind of acknowledgement. It stopped. It was looking at her. She knew this the way she knew when any animal was oriented toward her, not through a specific sensory input, but through the aggregate of cues that 11 years in the forest had made automatic. It was standing very still, and then, slowly, at exactly the tempo of her own breathing, it began to mirror her. She had her hands at her sides. It moved something. She could barely see the shape at all in the gray light between the firs, into a position that corresponded. She turned her head slightly left. It turned in correspondence. Not like mimicry, like reflection. Like a surface that had learned the specific shape it was meant to reflect. She raised her right hand, palm out, fingers together. It paused. 3 seconds. 4. Then it raised something in correspondence. She lowered her hand. It lowered. She turned around and walked out of the sector. She resigned on November 4th, 2019. The resignation letter cited personal reasons. Pel Okafor resigned the following March, after the thermal camera at the Goat Rock's boundary recorded something that made him delete the footage before submitting his survey data, something he had never done in 6 years. He did not tell her what was on it. She did not ask. There is a third person in this account, and she is the reason Wren Calloway finally decided to tell this story at all. Oksana Marevic had been a seasonal employee at Cowlitz Valley for 3 years when Wren resigned. She was 27, finishing a master's in forest ecology, methodical and precise in the way of a person who has learned that the natural world rewards exactness. Wren had supervised her during 2 summer seasons and trusted her judgment. In February 2020, 4 months after Wren's resignation, Oksana sent a text message that said only, "I got assigned to Eastern Perimeter, Langeal Ridge Connector. Did something happen out there?" Wren called her immediately. She told her everything, in order, without omission. Oksana listened without interrupting. When Wren finished, there was silence, and then Oksana said, "The birds were quiet this morning when I parked at the trailhead." Wren said, "Do not go back. I have a patrol assignment for Thursday." "I know. Don't go." There was a silence. Then Oksana said, carefully, "I found your flagging tape from October on the 2.4 marker. Someone had restaked it." Wren said nothing. "It was restaked with a piece of wood," Oksana said. "A piece of that hemlock. I recognize the fracture pattern from your photos. Someone took a piece of the broken hemlock and used it as a stake, neatly." "When?" "I don't know. But Wren, it's been 4 months. 4 months since you were last in that sector. 4 months since anyone was in that sector." Wren sat with that for a long time. "It knew you were coming," she said finally. Oksana resigned 2 weeks later. She has not spoken publicly about why, and she has asked Wren not to include the specific nature of what she encountered on her second patrol, the one she should not have taken, the Thursday one. Wren has honored that. What Oksana will say is that the thing she encountered was not dangerous in any way she could name with precision. It did not threaten her. It did not block her path. It did not touch her. What it did, she told Wren in the years since, was step out from between 2 trees and stand in the trail at a distance of approximately 30 meters and wait. She understood, with the complete and unambiguous understanding of a person receiving clearly transmitted information, that it had been waiting specifically, that it knew she was a different person from the one who had been there in October, and it had adjusted for that, and it had been patient about the adjustment. It had learned Oksana's face before she arrived. There is no 7th category in the Ranger District Field Manual. No protocol, no reporting structure, no checkbox on the standard patrol form for what these 3 people encountered along the Langeal Ridge Connector between October 3rd, 2019 and February 2020. Wren keeps a copy of her field journal from that period in a fireproof box. She has not opened it in 2 years. She does not need to. She remembers all of it with a clarity that is not faded, the way certain experiences do not fade because some part of the brain has assessed them and decided they are not safe to forget. She does not know what was in Pel's second thermal image, the one he deleted. She thinks about it sometimes, the way you think about a room you have been told never to open. She thinks about the flagging tape, laid flat, lengthwise, pointing toward the trailhead, pointing toward where she had come from, pointing toward where she would leave. She thinks about the fact that it had already been doing this when she arrived on October 3rd, that the birds were quiet on her very first morning, that whatever was in that forest had oriented itself to her patrol schedule before she had walked a single mile of the eastern perimeter, that it had known before she did. The Langeal Ridge connector is still open to foot traffic. There is a new ranger at Cowlitz Valley now. Wren does not know if they have noticed the quiet. If these accounts unsettled you the way they were meant to, consider leaving a like and subscribing. There are more stories like this waiting.